James control, where there is like a highway that can be attacked from a military base near there. They usually try to attack these trucks that are crossing to Jordan, but I don't really remember that we were attacked because I was unconscious most of the time.
I understand. So what condition was your leg in by the time you got into a hospital in Jordan?
Doctors told me it is in a very bad situation and they might amputate the leg from the hip. I was under a big danger of losing my whole leg.
And I think you had to have a number of operations, didn't you?
Yeah, so over 6 weeks I did around 14, 15 surgeries.
Assam's leg couldn't be saved and he lost most of it. One of his friends called his family to let them know that he was alive and on his way to Jordan. But Assam's girlfriend had no idea what had happened.
After 3 days when I arrived to Jordan, I could get a SIM card. I could use my phone to send her a WhatsApp to tell her what is going on.
And what was her response?
She checked the message and she didn't reply for the whole day, and then next day she replied back. What I knew later, 2 years later actually, that she was in a shock for,
understandably.
4 days.
So now, the conflict had put their romance in jeopardy. He was in Jordan and she was still in Syria. Assam didn't want to risk losing her forever, so he decided to make a formal proposal of marriage.
My relationship with her when I was in Syria, but it was a super complicated thing. It's not as easy as in Western world to have a girlfriend. But when I told my mother that I really want to do the official, traditional way to be able to continue my relationship with her, so she started the process of going, to the family, telling them that we want to propose to your daughter and so on.
Was she happy that you had done that, your girlfriend?
Of course, yeah. So she knew from the beginning that I will do this, but unless you do it, everything is not completely clear. But when I did this step, it was a huge difference in our relationship.
And your injury made no difference at all to your relationship with her? Eventually, Assam was discharged from hospital and adjusted to his new life in Oman.
I left the hospital in June 2013 and I spent the rest of the year almost doing nothing, being at home most of the time, smoking and eating junk food.
And did you have to use a wheelchair?
Yes, for the first month, yes, wheelchair, because I couldn't get a prosthesis in the beginning because of my complicated injury. So I was about to fall in depression because I was kind of active in my previous life, so it's very hard to sit home all the time. And then, fortunately, I met an organization which was doing a program in Jordan for providing prostheses for Syrian amputees and to train 12 people to become technicians in making prostheses. So I met the guys and it was the light in the end of the tunnel.
So did you want to learn in order to make yourself a prosthesis?
Yes. After a few weeks in the hospital, I started to think about this. That, okay, I lost my leg. I have now two choices. Either to move on and do something good to my life, or just to give up and say, okay, I am disabled for the rest of my life. So I was super motivated.
And when did you get your first prosthetic leg?
In January 2014. It is something amazing. Being able to walk without crutches is a huge difference for someone who used wheelchair for months and crutches for months. So.
And in the meantime, you were training to make prosthetics yourself. Did you realize that they were very much in demand?
Yeah, so, because of the war, because of the big number of amputees, there were thousands of amputees in Jordan. There was a huge demand for skills, for people who really want to work in this.
Assam made his first prosthetics and then began working with an organization that used 3D printing to custom make prosthetics. That was how he came up with one of his more memorable designs.
I met a Yemeni boy who was 5-6 years old. whole his body was completely burnt, and he lost his hand. And he was like in shock. He was refusing to speak to anyone, refusing to communicate at all. So the first thing I did when I first met him, I just showed him my legs. I used to wear short pants all the summertime, so when I showed him my leg, he was shocked. But then he started to speak, then he started to laugh, then he started to feel like someone really understands what is going on with this boy. So we asked him what is his favorite cartoon character, and he told us it's Ben 10. So
tell us about Ben 10. For those people who haven't seen Ben 10, what is Ben 10?
Ben 10 is a very new cartoon character, so even for my generation it's new. So this kid, Ben 10, has a magic watch that can transform him into 10 or 12, I'm not sure, different monsters. So he used this watch that is connected to his hand all the time. He cannot remove it.
So how did you take Ben 10 as an inspiration to create a prosthetic hand for this young boy from Yemen?
When we heard that Ben 10 is his favorite hero, we had then to customizing the designs. So we had a small LCD screen. He can turn it on and it starts to go through the monsters.
So his prosthesis had a magic watch attached to it?
Yes.
Right. And so what was his reaction when you showed it to him?
His reaction was he refused to give us the prosthesis back because it was the first trying session.
So you were just trying to try it on and then modify it, presumably.
Yes.
But he didn't want to let go?
He refused to give it back. So we had to leave it with him.
And was he very happy?
Yeah, he was like extremely happy because he's a small kid. He didn't realize yet what is going on. So he saw a toy and he wants to play with it. And oh, by the way, this toy can help me grab something or eat or something. But he was interested in the watch more than
That must have been very rewarding to see.
Yeah, it is one of the big emotional moments of my life to see this kid who a few weeks ago was not feeling well, was not communicating, to see him very comfortable, laughing again, it's amazing.
Well, eventually you decided that you wanted to move to Germany instead of staying in Jordan. Why did you want to do that?
After almost 1 year of trying to get a work permit, it was almost impossible to do this, and without work in Jordan, it is impossible to live. So I had a choice to leave Jordan, either to Turkey or to come to Europe, which was not an easy decision to make.
And so you traveled across the Mediterranean?
Yes.
A tough journey, I imagine.
Yes, it's tough, it's dangerous for normal people. What about an amputee and a blind guy and partially paralyzed guy? So
you were traveling with other people with disabilities, were you?
Yes. So I was traveling with two of my friends who I met in Jordan, and I don't know how to swim even before my injury, and with like 3 kilos of metal attached to my leg, I would drown anyway.
It must have been a great relief when you landed.
When we landed in Greece, it was the biggest relief of my life.
Since arriving in Berlin, Assam has started a new life. He continues to work with prosthetics and is also teaching refugees about 3D printing and robotics. But as he looks forward, his fiancée is still trapped in Syria.
The last time I saw her was before I leave my town in 2013.
We talked earlier about your mother beginning the process of proposing marriage. Were you able to complete that process?
Yes, so the process was completed officially, so now we are officially in documents also married after I arrived to Germany.
But it's not the most romantic way to get married, is it?
No. So when she comes here, hopefully by the New Year, we have to do this all again.
And then what will you do? How will the wedding happen then?
Well, I have been doing creative solutions and stuff, so I have to be really creative and combine something with, I don't know, 3D printed rings or, I don't know, artificial intelligence, I don't know, something like this.
So there'll be a robotic proposal?
Yes.
And you must be longing to see her?
Yes, it is the toughest thing now in my life. It's taking a lot of my mental power and emotional power because love and bureaucracy don't really work well together.
So we wish you a happy reunion in the new year.
Thank you so much.
Asem Hasna, the amputee who made prosthetics for other refugees. Great stories on the Outlook website, and Asem isn't the only designer we've had on the program. Here's a man you wouldn't want to take on in a water fight. Lonnie Johnson invented the Super Soaker.
I decided what engineering features I needed in the gun in order for it to perform, and so I proceeded to build it. You know, I had a little lathe that I use and milling machine that I use in my basement, and I made the parts and had no idea if the magic that I had in mind was really going to materialize in this gun when I finally got to the point where I was ready to pull the trigger.
Where did you pull the trigger for the first time?
The first time I shot it outside. I put the water in it and then shot it across the yard. And actually let my daughter play with it. She shoots kids in the neighborhood, and they couldn't get close to her.
And didn't you take the prototype to an Air Force picnic?
Yeah. In fact, this was a major who looked at it and said, "What is that you got, Johnson?" I said, "This is my water gun." He said, "It looks really strange. Does it work?" And I turned to him and shot him right between the eyes.
What was the reaction?
Oh, well, after then, by the time it was all over, everybody was throwing cups of water, cups of beer, and everything. It turned into a free-for-all, but we had a great time.
Are you a fan of the selfie? Well, Hiroshi Ueda from Japan is credited with creating an early type of selfie stick, which he called the extender stick, back in the 80s.
When I wanted to have a photo taken with my wife, I had to ask somebody to take a picture of us, and especially in Europe, there is always a danger of the camera being stolen. It happened to me more than once. When I was in the Louvre Museum in Paris, I asked the child to take a photo of us, but when I stepped away, the child ran away with my camera. And when I was in Italy, another camera was stolen in a small alleyway. Actually, I also had my passport stolen on the same trip. The philosophy behind it was that I didn't need to rely on anyone else to take a photo. I could take a picture myself whenever I like, wherever I like. The name extender is self-explanatory. It's like an extension of my arm. Whenever I want to extend it, I pull it up. And whenever I'm just walking around, I fold it up.
And have you ever wanted to fly? French inventor Yves Rossi found a way with a jetpack and a large man-made wing.
It's made of carbon fiber, Kevlar, fiberglass. Below that wing, there are two things, a harness, so that you can strap it on your hips, and engines. You need a push in here. The source, the dream is to be a bird. It's a very old dream. Icarus, it's a symbol. Angels in the church, they have wings. These are almost gods, and they have that divine ability almost to fly.
To hear those inventive stories in full, just search online for BBC Outlook.
This is the BBC World Service, where we visit a unique training school in the Middle East. An ancient Christian art.
The icon is not like a free art.
A prayer being revived in Bethlehem.
2,000 years ago, God was seen through Bethlehem through the eyes of the Virgin Mary.
At the Bethlehem Icon Center, Palestinian Christians are reconnecting with their spiritual heritage.
Christ was appearing to me step by step. Each layer I walked, it was like the door that Jesus came to me through.
And learning a valuable skill.
I'm just going to paint crisscross, rainbow pattern. people to be able to have a living wage from painting icons?
I like to draw Jesus and Virgin Mary. Now I am learning, and after I will sell it.
The Icon Painters of Bethlehem at bbcworldservice.com.
Coming up in part 2 of Outlook, the making of a wrestler. We'll find out how Kavita Devi is smashing gender stereotypes as the first Indian woman to join World Wrestling Entertainment.
I consider it a huge responsibility to be part of this WWE for the rest of the women who are going to follow in my footsteps. I want to make sure that the problems I faced, other women from India do not face this problem.
More from Kavita after the news.
BBC News with Jim Lee. India's lower house of parliament has approved legislation to outlaw the Muslim tradition of instant divorce. A Supreme Court ruling has banned the right of Muslim men to divorce their wives by simply speaking 3 times the word talaq, which means divorce in Arabic. The Electoral Commission in Liberia says the former international football star, George Weah, has won the presidential runoff. With almost all ballots counted, he has won more than 60% of the votes. The US Embassy in Ankara has announced the resumption of visa services, which were suspended after the Turkish authorities arrested a local embassy employee. Turkey has given assurances that none of the US mission local staff would be detained for carrying out official duties. Supporters of a prominent dissident Tibetan filmmaker say he has evaded tight surveillance in China and fled to the United States. They say Dundup Wangchen has been reunited with his family in San Francisco. The Israeli Education Minister Naftali Bennett has denied that Israel is facing international isolation, despite the overwhelming vote in the UN General Assembly against the recognition of Jerusalem as its capital. In a BBC interview, Mr. Bennett cited growing trade and technology links with other countries. United Nations human rights officials have condemned a decision by the Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski to pardon the former leader Alberto Fujimori. They say it's a slap in the face for victims of Mr. Fujimori's government. The defeated Republican candidate in the US Senate election in Alabama, Roy Moore, has filed a lawsuit to challenge the results, alleging voter fraud. Mr. Moore, whose campaign had been plagued by allegations of sexual misconduct, lost narrowly to his Democratic rival. President Maduro of Venezuela has accused Portugal of sabotaging pork deliveries in time for Christmas. There have been protests in the poorer parts of Caracas against the shortage of promised subsidised pork, a key ingredient for traditional Christmas meals. BBC News.
You're with Outlook from the BBC World Service. I'm Matthew Bannister. Coming up in this half, the wardrobe assistant who toured the world with ABBA and helped to create their glam 1970s look.
I love storytelling. I just like theater and film. And to create a person, that's what you do. You create a character that's so intriguing. It's like making a sculpture in clay. It's the same thing.
Or from Ingmarie Halling coming up. But before that...
From Haryana, India,
Let's step into the ring with the first Indian woman to take part in World Wrestling Entertainment, or WWE. The American-based TV format is watched by millions around the world. New recruit Kavita Devi is a former weightlifting champion. Perhaps a surprising career for a woman who grew up in a conservative area of rural northern India.
The place where I grew up, girls weren't allowed to go out much. So in that kind of a situation, my parents were very courageous. They decided to send us to school. In school festivals, I would participate in different kinds of sport like discus throw and all sorts of games, and I always came first, and that I found very encouraging. So when I finished my class 10th, I wanted to go to school, which was about 10 kilometers away from my village. But, you know, this was not very easy because most girls in the village were married off, and my parents wanted to do the same for me. But then I told them that, you know, I should be allowed to go out and I should be allowed to continue with my studies and continue with my sports practice. And they allowed me to go. In the new school, I would participate in all kinds of sports. I was crazy after games and sports, and that was wonderful for me.
Were there people in your village, in your community, who criticized your parents for allowing you to go to this school and for taking part in sport?
Yes, people in my village believed that why spend so much money on daughters? They're going to get married and then they would go off to their husband's house. But my brother, eldest brother, he was very, very supportive, and he always used to tell me that this is a very wrong belief that people in the village community have towards girls and towards you. And he used to say that girls should not be hidden, should be given equal opportunity. And he used to tell me, don't worry about these things. Just go, concentrate on your sport. Once you perform well, then we just have to prove them wrong and we'll be able to do that.
Why was it weightlifting that became your preferred sport? Why did you choose that?
One thing I was clear about was that I wanted to get away from the village. I wanted to leave the village, get out in the wider world. And my brother, he found out about two girls who were staying in a hostel and learning weightlifting. So he asked me if I would like to take up weightlifting. And I said, yes, I would. So I didn't think too much about what it was, but that is something that happened.
And was it very tough when you first got into the sport? Did you have to train very hard to reach the highest standards?
Yes, it was very tough for me. Initially, when I came from the village, I had even language problems. You know, I was from a small village in Haryana. I could only speak the local language. Then we were also facing financial problems. My parents were famous, so there wasn't that much money. My mother and father, they took turns to come and stay with me for a month each, so that they could take care of my food and they could ensure that I was getting the best of care. And I did really work very hard to be able to improve my game. Then I won my first medal in 2007.
Kavita kept participating in high-level national competitions, but in 2008 she was accused of taking a performance-enhancing drug and banned from competing for 2 years. This ban was later extended to 4 years. Kavita maintains that she was completely innocent.
It was very difficult for me. My childhood dreams were dashed to the ground. I was also getting older. You know, I was also coming under pressure to get married. So I decided to get married, taking advantage of the ban. And then in 2012, I had a baby boy. But, you know, when my baby was only 2 months old, I started practicing. And 3 to 4 months later, I went to play in the national games. By then, the ban was over. So I participated in the national games, and I won a gold medal.
Was it very hard to come back to peak fitness after the birth of your child?
My body had weakened a lot, but I had experience, and that helped me a lot in getting back on my feet. I got in touch with lots of coaches, and they all said no, nobody wanted to train me. Everyone said, you have a baby, and you know, if you're going to bring in a baby, then it's going to be a distraction for all the other students. But I was really keen to learn again and to restart my practice. My sister-in-law was also a weightlifter, so I went to my sister-in-law's coach in the end, and I requested him. I told him that I will leave the baby at home, I will not bring my baby, and I'll come on my own, but I'll really work hard. And he agreed. And the coach thought that, okay, I just wanted to do some kind of practice or diploma or whatever. But then I told him that, no, actually, I'm here to win a medal. And he looked me up and down and he said, you must be joking. You know, what happens is that whenever someone makes a negative comment, it makes me feel more positive. It just makes me more determined. So I also wanted to prove it to him that I could still do it. And it was very, very tough. I used to wake up at 4 a.m. I would prepare milk and food for my baby, and I would leave it at home, and I'd go running to the coaching ground. And before everybody else would come in, I would have already done the warming up. And in fact, after seeing all that, my coach was very impressed, and he would hold me out as an example to the other students and tell them that, look at her, you know, how impressive she is. She's even got a small baby, but despite that, she's working so hard. But it was not easy for me. I would be running between the coaching ground and home.
It was obviously very challenging, but you went on to win a series of gold medals, which was a wonderful success. How did your weightlifting career come to an end?
It ended because all the problems I faced, and no one understood the value of what I had done, the medals I had won, what I had given to the game. I needed a job, and I was thinking maybe I'll take up a job in the private sector somewhere, or maybe I'll join a gym as a trainer. I'll do anything so that I can earn some money and help with the upbringing of my child.
So how did you get involved in the World Wrestling Entertainment?
I was visiting my parents' home, and my brother, I told him about my decision. He told me that he had seen me fighting all my life, and he told me, don't quit. And he told my husband that, look, I know her very well, and I know that she's not going to be happy just sitting at home. So they both started thinking what I could do. But I was feeling really defeated. I was thinking, I don't want to do anything more. But then my husband was looking around on Facebook, and he found out about this center that the great Kali's friend runs in the town of Kurukshetra. Now, great Kali is someone who is hugely popular in India, and he is part of this wrestling in the United States. So we applied to them, and when they met me, then they said, yes, we've seen your weightlifting record, and with your height and your kind of determination, we think that you'll be able to do something in a year. So that's when I began with them.
Was it a very tough selection procedure to get accepted as one of the regular members of the WWE?
I trained really hard. What people do in 6 months, I achieved that in 2 months. When they came here, I had to do a physical test. So then they chose me as part of a group of 8 people from India who were invited to Dubai to take part in the trials. I was the only woman in the group. All the other 7 were men. I was told that they were very impressed with my performance, and now I've signed a contract with them for 3 years.
Well, you're the first Indian woman in the WWE. Do you think that gives you a big responsibility to the women of your country?
Yes, I consider it a huge responsibility as an Indian woman to be part of this WWE for the rest of the women who are going to follow in my footsteps from India. I want to make sure that the problems I faced, other women from India do not face this problem. I want to make it easier for everyone. I want to tell women here that our culture is very different from the culture that exists in the West. One of the problems that I faced was about the kind of costume that you're supposed to wear when you go on a fight. But that's where I made it a point, and I wore the Indian outfit. I wore salwar kameez. So I was just trying to tell other women from India that you can overcome these problems.
I understand that you will have to move to the United States to carry out your work. Won't you miss your young son and your husband when you do that?
Yes, I'm feeling very nervous. I'm getting a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. In India, I feel I can see him anytime. He actually doesn't stay with me because I'm out and about quite a bit, but he stays with his aunt. But I still can visit him anytime I want. Of course, if I'm so far away in the United States, I won't be able to do that from there. But I have been assured by the people at WWE that my family will be able to visit me in 6 months' time. So I will have to go with that hope. I'll just have to live with the hope that we'll be united again soon. I sometimes do worry if my child will one day grow up and say, but mother, you weren't there for me when I wanted you. But I think that he will understand. In my heart of heart, I think that he will understand. And he will also feel proud of me. This was my dream. The fact that I'll have to stay away from the family is something that I feel really bad about. But I'm sure my family understands, right? And that's the reason why they have always supported me.
Kavita Devi, the first Indian woman to take part in World Wrestling Entertainment. She was speaking to me through an interpreter. You're with Outlook. I'm Matthew Bannister. In the 1970s, the Swedish group ABBA dominated the charts around the world. they're still one of the best-selling artists of all time. The band were famous for their over-the-top costumes, featuring huge flared trousers, teetering platform shoes, and tons of sequins. An exhibition of some of those costumes is currently running at London's South Bank Centre, and more are on show at the ABBA Museum in Stockholm, where the curator is Ing-Marie Halling. She's a great choice for the job, because she used to help the band get dressed when they were on the road. But how do you get a job like that?
I got into my training as a wig maker from start, and then I decided to start working as a wardrobe lady, wig maker, and makeup. And I worked with a lot of theaters and ballet companies until I started working with ABBA. I lived together with a guy for 10 years. He was a guitarist for ABBA. In 75, he took me to one of the concerts they had on a tour, and I got to know them, and Frida became my friend. She knew that I was working with makeup and costume and hair, so when they were going to Australia in 77, she just called me and asked if I wanted to come. And I was supposed to go with a ballet company to what then was called Soviet Union. And I realized that it was much more fun to go to Australia with ABBA. So that's what I did. I said, yes, thank you. I love storytelling. I just love watching film. And to create a person, that's what you do. You create a character. That's so intriguing. It's like making a sculpture in clay. It's the same thing. My job when I was out there on tour with them was from the beginning working with the wigs, because they had 2 wigs in this little mini musical in the show at that time in 77. And did some makeup on the guys and the girls, and getting in and out of costumes. And I made sure the costumes looked clean and nice. I washed them sometimes in my sink in my hotel room, and just the feeling seeing them in a cabinet in a museum today is crazy. We had a quick change on the back of the stage in one concert, and I was unzipping Frida, and she was getting into something else, and then we could hear people were shouting and screaming and laughing, and we said to each other, this is not a point in the show where people used to scream and laugh. And then one of the road crews shouted to us that there's a shadow of you on the wall. So she was actually, like 14-meter high shadow on the wall on the back of the stage. That's so funny. Hilarious. But she was all happy with that. That ABBA had such a crazy costumes and outfits. Yeah, but that was then. At that time it was okay. Today it will be something else. I think the ones that they had in 79, the one with the blue and silver striped diagonal Alps, inspired by the Swedish mountains, I think they look really well. And it seems like Madonna thought that as well, because she wanted a copy of Frida and Agneta's bodysuit, you call it, for a video she did Hung Up. Of course, I would never believe that if you had asked me back in the day in 77 when we flew to Australia with ABBA, that I, 40 years later, would be sitting in a BBC studio talking about working with them, it would be kind of absurd. And that's how life is. You never know. You just go with the flow and things happen. It will not, but if there would be a reunion, I might come in handy as helping with costumes. That would not happen. I would love it would happen, but it won't.
now the creative director of the ABBA Museum in Stockholm. Well, that's all for today. Please join Jo for Outlook Weekend, where she has two stories of people who didn't know what was round the next corner. One from Norway and the other from South Africa. It's an intriguing lesson. Tune in if you can. BBC.
You're listening to Witness, the BBC World Service History programme, with me, Monica Whitlock. And today we're going back to the freezing winter of 1941 in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, where I've been speaking to Mikhail Bobrov, one of a team of climbers whose daring exploits helped save the city from aerial bombardment during World War II. Mikhail Bobrov was 16 when he made the trip that set the course of his life. He turned to climb as a mountaineer.
My longing to climb began when I first set eyes on the mountains. As a boy in Leningrad, I won a skiing competition. The prize was a trip to the Elburz Mountains. Those mountains were so beautiful, they stole my heart. So I trained, and I learned to climb.
But a year later, in June 1941, Nazi Germany launched its lightning advance on the USSR, smashing its western frontiers and descending on its principal cities. Mikhail was called up and wounded in those very first weeks. He was invalided home to his parents when the Leningrad authorities decided to disguise the city's golden domes and spires, both to spare the historic buildings and to stop the German bombers using them as bearings. And so a small band of climbers, 2 women and 2 men, was summoned to the headquarters of the Leningrad front. It was decided to start by coating the biggest cathedral, St. Isaac's, in paint. Its gold 100-metre dome rose above the very centre of Leningrad, close to the Hermitage Museum and the Admiralty.
We got going in mid-August. First, we painted over the big cross and the small cupola. We could reach these by steps. Then we roped ourselves up and got going on the main dome. The wounded sailors from the hospital helped by hauling up buckets of paint, a special grey paint they use for ships, the colour of sky. We worked fast. We got it done in less than 3 weeks. The weather was pretty good. The city was under fire, but not too heavily. It went really well.
But on September the 8th, 1941, the ring of Nazi artillery closed round the city. The blockade of Leningrad had begun. For the next 2.5 years, the population would be trapped in what would go down in history as the longest and deadliest siege in modern times. Mikhail was still only 18 years old. He and the other climbers moved on to the Admiralty, a vast building with a 70-metre golden steeple. On the very top perched a weather vane in the shape of Peter the Great's ship.
The body of the spire is made of oak. Well, there's nothing to hang on to, nowhere to fix our equipment. And another problem, how to deal with the ship at the top of the spire.
Still worse, the gold leaf was frail and would react badly with the Navy issue paint. Instead of painting, the climbers were told to cover the spire with canvas.
The girls and women from the Navy filled the canvas like a skirt on the floor of the Admiralty building gym. They gathered it. If we'd taken the canvas loose, the wind would have blown it away and maybe damaged the spire. That canvas was heavy. 500 kilos. Only the and tackle to hoist it up the spire. Then we secured it and cut the cords so the canvas came tumbling round the spire. Our girls climbed up and sewed the canvas down with huge needles, this long.
Week after week, the lead climber, Olga Firsova, climbed the Admiralty spire, armed with her huge needle and fighting to subdue half a ton of wet and billowing canvas.
When Olga was up there, 5 or 8 meters below the top, a German fighter plane attacked her, a Messerschmitt. The bullets flew all around, but didn't hit her. We hauled her down as fast as we could. She was beside herself with fright. She'd even seen the face of that Nazi pilot. That was the first time the Germans attacked us climbers, but not the last.
The Germans are still on the southwest outskirts of the city.
Through the growing dark and cold as autumn turned to winter, the climbers scaled spires and domes. They had no special equipment, just ropes and warm sweaters. They ate the standard Leningrad ration, just one piece of bread a day and a handful of grain. In the depths of winter, the climbers approached their toughest challenge, the Cathedral of St. Peter and St. Paul. With its 122-metre bell tower, it was then the tallest Orthodox building in the world.
It was freezing. Minus 42, 43 Celsius. Once even minus 44. Then there was the hunger. All the time. If there'd been no doves and crows in the cathedral precinct, we'd never have made it. We netted them and ate them. The crows, bitter. You had to blow it for ages. The dove soup. It was delicious. We were so scrawny and weak that we couldn't get home after work. My house was nearby, but my mate Alois lived further away. So we decided to sleep in the cathedral, by the tombs of Peter the Great and his family. We made ourselves a sort of like a cell. We had a little homemade stove for warmth. We dragged in a huge mattress from a bombed-out house, and there we lived.
The immense bell tower stood out like a beacon in the snow.
It was dreadful under fire. The Germans saw that the last reference point for their artillery was disappearing, and they could clearly see us idiots clambering around trying to paint the spire. They flared at us, but we couldn't work during the day. We were too exposed, so we painted after dark. And it was like a nightmare because the paint froze. You paint the spire and come back the next night and the paint's already frozen and fallen off. It was really terrible.
The climbers managed to keep the paint liquid using a blowtorch, working quickly and repainting constantly, night after night, week after week. High above Leningrad, the climbers had a special perspective of the city besieged.
Alois and I, we could see what people in the city couldn't. They were in their houses at night and had bomb shelters. But us two oddballs, we could see everything. We cry sometimes watching such beauty, such terror. The city standing and fighting to the death, everything blazing. It's hard to believe now.
The climbing team was disbanded early in 1942. Those were the very bleakest months of the siege. 100,000 Leningrad civilians were dying each month, most of starvation. Mikhail's fellow climbers, Alia and Alois, died of hunger. So did his parents. Young Mikhail returned to the front. But before he did, he was witness to another exceptional Leningrad moment. Olga and her husband Misha were both musicians, and Misha played in the famous performance of Shostakovich's 7th Symphony in besieged Leningrad.
I was at that concert. It was the 9th of August, 1942. Misha played his violin, and he invited me. I was sitting right up close to the musicians in the Philharmonic. It was close to the army hospital, and many wounded soldiers came to listen. It was summer, so they were just in their dressing gowns, some of them in white nightshirts. People were sitting in the aisles, in the gallery. How could we have surrendered?
Mikhail Bobrov went on to marry the love of his life, a bomber pilot called Larissa. He became a well-known athlete and skied for the Soviet Union in the 1952 Winter Olympic Games. Mikhail is now the only surviving climber of Leningrad. He still lives in the city. When we met there, he told me he still kept fit at the age of 94 and was only now giving up sport.
This is the BBC World Service, where we're in search of the perfect country.
My perfect country is back to once again scour the globe for parts that appear to be working, dismantle them, examine the parts, and if they're up to scratch, add them to our imaginary utopia. Join Steve Glover as we start this series in Rwanda, a nation that's perfect candidate by 80%. But how did they do it?
My perfect country.
Coming soon.